She was ranked outside the top 150 just 2 years ago. Nobody in the tennis world was talking about her. Then she beat Iga Świątek. Then she beat Jessica Pegula. Then she made history as the first Filipina to crack the WTA top 20. Now, Alex Eala walks into the Cincinnati Open as the number 17 seed, the highest of her entire career, and the tennis world is holding its breath. What she does next could change everything. Alex Eala's story does not begin with fame. It begins with grit, sacrifice, and a family that believed in her long before the rankings did. And that belief is exactly what carried her from the outskirts of Philippine tennis to the biggest stages in the sport. Born in Manila and raised in a country where tennis has never been the national obsession, Eala had to fight for every opportunity. She trained far from home at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Spain, where she sharpened not just her forehand, but her mentality, learning to compete against players who had every resource imaginable while she had to earn hers. Her junior career hinted at greatness: a Grand Slam junior title, a reputation as one of the most disciplined young players on tour. But junior success rarely guarantees professional success. And for years, Eala had to grind through qualifying draws, ITF events, and heartbreaking near misses just to get noticed. What made her different was not raw talent alone. It was her refusal to accept limits placed on her by rankings or expectations. Slowly, match by match, she began climbing, picking up wins that surprised bigger names and forced commentators to start paying attention. By 2025 and into 2026, the breakthrough arrived in a way few saw coming. Eala began stringing together victories against players ranked far above her. She toppled former world number 1 Iga Świątek. She took down Grand Slam champion Naomi Osaka, and she proved she belonged, not on potential alone, but on results. Every win added fuel to a narrative building quietly in the background, that a genuine contender was emerging from a country with almost no tennis infrastructure to speak of. And that narrative only grew louder as she kept delivering under pressure, in front of crowds that had never seen a Filipino compete at this level before. Her rise has not just been about points and rankings. It has been about representation, about an entire nation watching a 21-year-old carry expectations that would crush most seasoned professionals, and doing it with a composure that belies her age. Coaches who have worked with her describe a player obsessed with details, someone who studies opponents relentlessly and treats every practice session like a match. And that obsession is now paying off on the sport's biggest stages. What started as a story of an underdog chasing a dream has become one of the most compelling rises in modern tennis. And as she enters Cincinnati, that rise is about to face its toughest test yet. Every great sports story needs a defining moment, the instant where potential turns into proof. And for Alex Eala, that moment came in Washington, where she captured her first WTA Tour singles title, and in doing so, became the first Filipino player in history to achieve that feat. This was not a modest run through a weak draw. This was a gauntlet, and Eala walked through it like a player who belonged among the elite. She opened her campaign against defending champion Leylah Fernandez and found a way to win. Then she faced Elina Svitolina, a former top 5 player and Grand Slam semifinalist, and beat her too, building momentum that most young players simply cannot sustain. Then came Naomi Osaka, a 4-time Grand Slam champion and one of the most recognizable names in the sport, and Eala beat her as well, sending a message to every player in the locker room that this was no longer a rising talent to watch cautiously. This was a threat to be taken seriously right now. The final delivered the kind of drama that turns a good tournament into an unforgettable one. Eala faced top seed Jessica Pegula, one of the most consistent players on tour, and found herself down a set, staring at a deficit that would have ended most Cinderella runs right there. Instead, she rallied. She fought back to win 4-6, 6-4, 6-0, closing out the final set in dominant fashion and completing one of the most impressive title runs of the season. A run that included wins over a former champion, a former top 5 star, and a Grand Slam winner, all before beating the tournament's top seed in the final. The victory did more than add a trophy to her collection. It rewrote what was considered possible for Philippine tennis. A sport with almost no professional pipeline was suddenly producing a genuine WTA Tour champion, and it sent shockwaves through a national sports culture more accustomed to celebrating boxing and basketball. Back home, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Fans flooded social media, local broadcasters scrambled to cover a sport they rarely touch, and a new wave of young Filipino players suddenly believed that tennis greatness was not reserved for other countries. For Eala personally, the Washington title validated years of sacrifice, distant training camps, missed milestones back home, and relentless self-belief in the face of long odds. And it set the stage for what would become the most important month of her career. If Washington announced Alex Eala's arrival, what followed only confirmed it was no fluke. It started with a historic run at Wimbledon that pushed her into the 4th round of a Grand Slam for the first time in her career, a result that instantly elevated her from rising star to legitimate contender. Grass courts are notoriously difficult for players without deep experience on the surface, yet Eala adapted quickly, using her aggressive baseline game and improved serve to trouble opponents who had far more grass court pedigree. And her run captured attention well beyond tennis circles, becoming a genuine national moment back in the Philippines, where fans stayed up through odd hours just to watch her matches live. From there, her season carried directly into the North American hardcourt swing. She competed at the Canadian Open and once again proved her Washington breakthrough was sustainable, advancing all the way to the round of 16 before finally being stopped by Tokyo Olympic champion Belinda Bencic in a tightly contested battle. What made the Toronto run remarkable was not just the results, but the atmosphere she created. Filipino fans turned out in numbers organizers rarely see for a player outside the tournament's headline names, packing stands and turning her matches into de facto home games, a phenomenon fans affectionately began calling Barangay Toronto, a nod to the tight-knit Filipino community spirit showing up thousands of miles from Manila. That kind of fan energy is rare in tennis, a sport often criticized for lacking the passionate, vocal support seen in team sports. Yet Eala's matches began feeling like events, with chants, flags, and an emotional intensity that visibly fed her performances on court. Her coaches and peers have noted a visible shift in her demeanor, a player who seems to draw strength from the crowd rather than being overwhelmed by expectation. That is a rare trait in athletes still in the early stages of their careers. By the time the Canadian Open concluded, Eala had played more matches than any other player inside the WTA Top 20 this season, a staggering workload that speaks to both her rapid rise through tournament draws and her physical resilience. She had competed in 56 matches, with 37 wins before Cincinnati even began. That volume of high-level tennis, combined with the emotional weight of representing an entire nation, would be enough to break many young players. Yet Eala has continued producing results, arriving in Ohio not fatigued but sharpened, a fighter who has learned to convert pressure into fuel rather than letting it become a burden. Cincinnati was always going to matter, but the way the draw unfolded has turned this tournament into something far bigger than a routine WTA 1000 stop. Because for the first time in her career, Alex Eala enters as the number 17 seed, the highest seeding she has ever carried into an event at this level. That seeding earned her a first-round bye, a small mercy considering the physical toll of 56 matches already played this season, but it also raised the stakes immediately. Her first appearance on court comes against the winner of a battle between Romania's Elena Gabriela Ruse and Poland's Magda Linette, two players who know exactly how dangerous Eala has become and will be looking to end her run before it truly starts. History adds extra tension here. Eala's only previous meeting with Ruse ended in defeat, a 3-set loss during the 2024 US Open qualifiers, back when Eala was still fighting her way up the rankings, meaning a potential rematch carries a real sense of unfinished business. Against Linette, the picture is more balanced, an even head-to-head record that includes 2 wins for Eala already this season. Whichever opponent emerges, this will not be a comfortable stroll for the Filipina star, but rather the kind of gritty, high-pressure test that has increasingly defined her breakthrough year. Win that opener, and the path only gets tougher, with a likely third-round showdown against ninth-seeded Amanda Anisimova looming, a player ranked inside the world's top 10, and someone Eala has never faced before on tour. A genuine measuring stick match that could define how far this Cincinnati run ultimately goes. Beyond the immediate matchups, the broader draw has been reshaped by absences that matter. Wimbledon finalist Karolina Muchova, Canadian Open finalist Victoria Mboko, and Italian star Jasmine Paolini were all forced out through injury, thinning the field at the very top and opening a door that a player in Eala's current form is uniquely positioned to walk through. Naomi Osaka's late withdrawal, citing fatigue, only adds to a sense that this tournament, despite being loaded with talent, has cracked open in ways that favor momentum and confidence over reputation and seeding alone. For Eala, every match in Cincinnati now carries weight far beyond ranking points. A deep run here would not just cap off the most successful stretch of her career, it would send an unmistakable message heading into the US Open, that this Filipina phenomenon is no longer a surprise story. She is a genuine threat every single time she steps on court. Tennis history is filled with players who had one great month and faded quietly back into the pack, which is exactly why Cincinnati matters so much for Alex Eala right now. This tournament is the moment that will determine whether her incredible summer becomes a lasting career turning point, or simply an unforgettable but isolated peak. A strong showing here, especially against the kind of opposition waiting in her draw, would validate everything that happened in Washington, Wimbledon, and Toronto. It would prove to skeptics and rivals alike that her rise was built on genuine improvement rather than a fortunate string of matchups. There is also the matter of legacy building beyond her own career. Every match Eala plays at this level is simultaneously growing the sport in a country that has historically had almost no presence on the professional tennis map, inspiring young Filipino athletes who now see a realistic pathway to the top of a sport once considered completely out of reach. The emotional stakes extend to her family as well, who sacrificed years shuttling between distant training academies and modest tournament budgets, long before sponsorship money and global attention arrived. Every win in Cincinnati carries a weight far beyond the prize money or ranking points on offer. Physically, this tournament represents a critical test of endurance. She enters having already played more matches than any other top 20 player this season, and how her body and focus hold up under that accumulated fatigue will say a great deal about her readiness for the US Open just weeks away. Mentally, the challenge is just as significant, because expectation has shifted entirely. She is no longer the underdog quietly sneaking up on bigger names. She is now the target, the player opponents specifically prepare for. And handling that shift in pressure separates good careers from legendary ones. If she can navigate this draw, potentially avenging her lone loss to Ruse, and then testing herself against a top 10 opponent in Anisimova, Cincinnati could stand as the tournament that cemented her as a permanent fixture near the top of women's tennis, rather than a feel-good story of the season. And if she falls short, that will not erase what she has already accomplished this year, but it will raise real questions about consistency at the highest level, questions every rising star eventually has to answer. Either way, what happens on the courts of Mason, Ohio over these 2 weeks will shape the conversation heading into the final Grand Slam of the season. And for a 21-year-old who has already rewritten what was thought possible for a Filipino tennis player, the story is only just getting started. The entire tennis world is now watching every single point. If you enjoyed this latest tennis update and want to stay ahead of the biggest stories in the world, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel right now. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of the action. See you in the next video.